which I did the other day for a couple of hours, so oops.
Good evening, members of council and viewing audience who've joined us on YouTube. We'll call the meeting to order. And before that, I'll read after that, land acknowledgement.
Which I did the other day for a couple of hours, so oops.
We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, the Three Fires Confederacy, members of council and viewing audience who've joined us, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron, Wendat, and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. We'll have a moment of silent reflection and then we'll stand for the singing of our national anthem. Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any conflict of interest? None noted. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held October 12, 21 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Akpata and Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Mayor's comments. I have a couple. We have completed the Malden Road Transportation, Public Safety and Urban Design Improvements Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Addendum. The project is now in the formal final 30-day review period as part of the Notice of Study Completion stage. Information is available on the town's website and written comments from the public are welcome until November 15th, 2021. We are looking forward to seeing many of our families enjoying this second annual truck or treat event at the Vollmer Complex this Saturday. I'm sure members of council will be filling up their bags of tricks. Residents or families of veterans of LaSalle or the former township of Sandwich West are encouraged to submit their photos and information to be added to the town's website on our page that honors our veterans. Visit the town's website for more information. The town of LaSalle, in partnership with the Royal Canadian Legion, will host a Remembrance Day ceremony on Thursday, November 11th at 11 a.m. at LaSalle Cenotaph Park. For those who prefer to take part in the ceremony from home, the service will also be live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. More information will be shared this week. We have the Community and Safety Wellbeing Plan. That will be presented by John Matheson. Thank you. Mr. Matheson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of council. If it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Clerk, I'll just share my screen. And I believe you are seeing the document called Windsor Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, Town of LaSalle. If someone will just confirm that, I'll be considerably less nervous. But otherwise, I'll dive right in. The purpose tonight is to provide you with a further update in the progress on that plan. I think we were with you in the summer to report on the initial prioritization of the regional risk and protective factors and some initial priorities and strategies. And so over the course of the summer, further work has gone into developing specific actions, performance measurements and outcomes. And that process is now largely complete. And so now we're taking a tour of each of the member municipalities. And my goal tonight will be to update you on the progress of the plan since you last saw it. And I apologize if it seems like I'm emulating the speed of an auctioneer, but I know you have very tight timelines for this, and there's rather a lot to get through. I'll jump first to a slide that I believe you've seen before because it's the best place to start. This is what you saw last time when we had the 4 basic priorities that we were going to be further developing, related to good governance and data, engaged and safe communities, mental health and substance use supports, and financial security and economic equity. And what you see in each of those columns now is what you saw before. And those were the beginnings of a description of what would be done, but they were a bit vague. Through the process, we've now completed 91 virtual engagements and over 103 hours of engagement of meetings in total, and then 1,900 stakeholders and residents who've worked on the plan. And that's actually quite an impressive number for Windsor Essex. Toronto, by way of comparison, had about 4,000 participants, but it's a community that has a population of about 7 times the size. So this report has been the product of quite a significant amount of engagement. And so the recommendations that you're going to see that further elaborate on those 4 principles are a deep reflection of that engagement. This slide is a bit of an eye test, and so I won't stay here long other to say that it provides you with the plan at a glance. And the one thing I will mention about it is you probably recall there was a dartboard graphic that we showed many times, and it talked about the goal of community and safety well-being plans to move from crisis response, which is kind of at the inner ring, but it's in a way the most disappointing and least satisfying ring to engage at, because it's when problems have already happened. And so it's the most expensive time to intervene. It's when people's lives have already gone wrong. And so it's an essential part of what must be done, but it's the least satisfying part of what we can do. So the goal of this plan is to try and make contributions that help deal with either intervention before the crisis happens, or better still, prevention, or better still, social development that attacks the root causes of the problems to begin with. And as you can see from the color scheme that tracks from that graphic that you have seen a few times now, you can see that while some of the things here relate to continued progress on improving our capacity for crisis response, the majority of them live up to the goals of community safety well-being plans of being further up that value chain of being prevention or social development or risk intervention. But rather than doing anything else with this slide, what I'll do is I'll move to the detailed ones, which will not test your eyesight to the same degree. So under the first heading of good governance and data activities, and it's my belief that this is the thing that's going to have the biggest lasting impact, because these are the recommendations that in effect say, however we were doing it was good enough before, but we can do better by breaking down the silos between the various groups and creating a kind of memorandum of understanding in terms of reference with senior leadership table partners. That'll mean that there will always be collaboration across the various entities that didn't used to always collaborate with each other, and create this permanent table for working on these priorities in this document. And that new approach of working together that'll bring together police and housing and other community agencies and mental health supports and economic security and land use planning, that kind of integrative approach represents a significant step forward, and in many respects would have been a significant outcome even if there was nothing else in the report. so you can see some of the specific activities under that. The second is the thing that's going to make that table powerful. It's the development of a data consortium of partner organizations to help support ongoing planning and service delivery. And of course, as you know very well, there's considerable barriers to sharing data unless it's all done properly, unless there's appropriate data sharing agreements and appropriate security to overcome all the various privacy rules that keep us from being able to share what we need, which might be able to help different agencies work together. So the 1-2 punch of a table that works together and data sharing agreements that allow them to get the best of what they know in a safe and a secure and appropriate fashion is a very powerful tool for improving our public administration. And so you can see in this diagram, what's intended to say is there's this regional senior leadership table, and it'll continue on a permanent basis, feeding off into both Windsor and the county, and then of course the member municipalities. They will work at each of these 4 levels of goals, which are identified, and come up with specific action tables. And as much as possible, no one wants to reinvent the wheel. So where there are existing tables focusing on these things, they'll be at least the core of the action that's going on. And or perhaps maybe that there's no existing entities, and so they'll be created. But the real point about the first set of initiatives is silo busting and ensuring that we have the data to benefit from it. The second set of initiatives has to do with improving the representation and inclusion of priority populations in the decision-making process for initiatives. And this really came out of the community consultation. They said, look, it's great if you're going to do things, but please don't tell us that you know best. Please experience the learned experience of people who live under these institutions and let us tell you how to make them better. Don't you just tell us how to make them better. And so 2.1 speaks to increasing representation of priority populations in the various leadership tables. And then secondly, ensuring that there is a habit and practice of engagement with priority communities early in planning stages. And so if you take the combination of getting the right people at the table, doing the proper consultation, having the right data, and making certain that it's inclusive, these orange boxes collectively are a very powerful contribution to the process. Now, the other 3 are not so much how we're going to do it, they are what we're going to do. And again, they come out of the community consultation. The first is engaged in safe communities. And the first goal under it is increasing the access to safe and affordable housing. Now, sadly, the table did not have a magic wand to be able to fix the housing problem that, of course, is a challenge pretty much in communities all across Ontario. But it came up with 3 specific initiatives that respect the appropriate governance and funding models and who has to decide who gets to pay for what they're all about here is taking advantage of 3 opportunities to do better with what we have now. The first is increasing awareness and utilization of existing housing supports and programs, because we heard that too often they go underutilized. So the first is about making the best use of what we have. The second was in recognition of the strong linkages between municipal planning policies and what gets built, and reviewing and assessing planning and growth related policies to promote a larger and more diverse housing supply. It's not to say so much that we didn't have the tools that we needed at the time we needed them, but it's a recognition that those tools may need to be altered or tweaked or amended or brought forward so that they represent best practice for getting the housing mix that we need today and moving forward. And the third is ensuring that there's appropriate provincial and federal advocacy to support greater access to more funding, because as we know, there isn't enough, and we know that the primary funding targets are not so much local government, who don't have the fiscal capacity, but the provincial and federal governments. So 3.3 is a recognition of that. Jumping from housing supply to safe communities and connected neighborhoods, there are 3 specific initiatives here. The first is increasing access to organized programming in communities. The second is promoting community-led projects and initiatives such as neighborhood walks and other sort of piloted projects that represent best practices to kind of help better utilize crime prevention through the integration of social activity and community engagement. And then finally, partnering as much as possible to increase access to safe indoor and community outdoor spaces. You'll recall that we were in the field doing a lot of the research on this at the height of the lockdown, and it came up again and again and again that there wasn't adequate space for safe indoor or outdoor community spaces. And there was a recognition that we needed to better leverage, best leverage what we had in the community as a first step. And so those are the first there. Jumping in, I'm looking at the clock, jumping ahead to mental health and substance abuse. This came up again and again and again, particularly during COVID, as being a situation that had been exacerbated by the stresses and strains that we all understood that came about because of the challenges of the times. So step one is to promote the destigmatization of mental health and addiction issues, to encourage people to use the supports that are there and not feel stigmatized by using what is there, because it's a real tragedy if people need help and they simply won't go to get it. Secondly, it's to leverage and support the mental health services sector around harmonized communications and intergovernmental advocacy to increase and improve available mental health supports. As we all understand with housing, similarly, the lead agency or the lead government on delivering mental health services improvements has to be the provincial government. They've announced the intention to do so, and 5.2 is about making sure that we have coordinated asks so that Windsor-Essex gets its share of what's necessary. Number 6 is the one that I identified that was the need to simply provide a better response to those in crisis. Of all the things that we identified, this was the one that came up as being the biggest weakness in terms of meeting those most in need. So 6.1 is about expanding programs that leverage crisis response teams that bring together both police and mental health workers. Obviously, one of the best ways to make certain that you don't have a taser or firearm incident in responding to a mental health problem, like we tragically see too often, is to send a mental health worker as opposed to a sworn police officer to an incident in the first place. And so expansion of making sure that you get the right person to the right place at the right time to meet the right problems of people who need them is obviously a very positive initiative. And these have already been piloted and have been starting to grow throughout Windsor and Essex, but the problem that we heard again and again was that there wasn't enough capacity to meet the need. Secondly, improving community trust in the emergency services and creating a platform for communications to build stronger relationships between service providers and communities is also essential. We've seen the tragic events in the United States arising from the Floyd situation. That sort of thing has happened on its own scale in a different way too many times, all over. And we're never exempt from that. And so 6.2 is recognizing that there's a need for constant investment in that. And we heard that as much from the police and emergency service stakeholders as we did from the community. So that's something that can and must be done better. And coming to the fourth and final heading, financial security and economic equity. It was clearly identified that poverty has been a problem for a long time, certainly longer. It pre-existed us and it will outlive us, but it's always a good time to conduct a review of the gaps, specifically in Windsor-Essex, to figure out how they can best be filled on the emergency support for people at different stages of life. And so that's what 7.1 is about. And then goal number 8 is about promoting local employment, because emergency support is one thing, but helping give people the tools either through education, which is 8.1, promoting local institutional partnerships, internships, and apprenticeships and such, or 8.2, leveraging targeted economic development strategies in key priority neighborhoods. So very quickly, those are the various 8 goals of the 4 priorities of the plan. In your material, you also have some LaSalle specific material, but you've seen this before, and it's really just there for your reference. So that leads us to, again, what we were hoping from tonight. The plan is for these plans to be presented to City Council and to Essex County Council, who are ultimately the decision makers, in mid-November, but it was decided that they should be presented to each of the area municipalities for their input and consideration prior to that. And that is the purpose for us being here tonight, to both tell you how they've evolved since we last spoke and to seek your comments or answer your questions. So Look at that, Mr. Mayor, only 7 seconds over. I'm happy to turn it back to you. And if anybody knows a good auction, someone who needs an auctioneer, maybe you can put my name forward. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Matheson. That was a good detailed report. I like the comment you stated about the number of participants in relation to Toronto. So it's nice to know that our community is involved. I'll open up to council for questions. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple quick comments, overview. Myself, I'm in the mental health field, and seeing that we're working together, moving that forward, especially with police and responding and the youth involved in certain situations. I guess the pilot program, how far along and what kind of instances have we seen as far as mental health workers showing up before the police? Are they doing it the same? Can you kind of explain that, how that's working?
Well, you know, I wouldn't be in a position to get into it into too much detail tonight. But what is working very well is the general approach of making certain that you know, mental health isn't criminalized. You know, a person who's having a mental health crisis, a person who's fallen asleep in the park, you know, someone calls 911. We have to make a triage decision at 911, and we can decide to send 1 or 2 men who are, you know, trained in the use of force, or we could decide to send 1 or 2 people who are trained in mental health intervention. And I think the real important thing is that there be an assessment that keeps the mental health workers safe, but that also keeps the person who needs assistance safe. And, you know, that's where the protocols that get developed at the time of the triaging, where, you know, you ask the right questions about, well, you know, does the person seem to be engaged, have a crisis? Does the person seem to be armed? Does the person seem to be in any way violent? Does the person seem to be in any way agitated? They find out no, 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 no. And that's a great opportunity to send someone to provide assistance of a different kind, because typically when the police are dispatched to a person who's in that situation, what will happen is they'll arrive, they'll say, oh, you need a mental health support, and then they'll call those resources and bring them in as well. And so really the trick is to try and get the best response to people as quickly as possible at the, you know, with the greatest efficiency. And but you know, I'm not sufficiently armed to answer your what I think is your real question, which is how is it working on the ground in your community today? And I couldn't help you with that, but I'm sure that my colleague Mr. Gill would probably be delighted to come back and talk to you about that sometime, you know, with a specific report on, you know, how incident response is working in your neighborhoods.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Having said all that, this is awesome. This is great steps forward. Understand that money makes the world go round, and as far as the housing crunch goes, I mean, the prices are crazy, and the amount of land is worth crazy money. So without upper levels of assistance, it's really hard and almost impossible to move stuff like this forward. But I'm glad that we're trying to utilize what we have to make it as best as we can. So kudos to this. Is very good. Thank you.
Mr. Militia has something to add.
To Councillor Carrick, to your first comment, both Senior Constable Segan and Acting Deputy Chief Jason Woods were integral in the committee that was involved with the development of the plan. And I know that in speaking with Deputy Chief Woods, he had advised that a number of those protocols that Mr. Matheson had spoke of are already underway and being implemented. And I know I just seen him at one point, he popped up on the screen. Yeah, there he is again. So he may be able to add more, you know, more LaSalle specific protocols in terms of how those types of calls are handled.
That'd be great.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I won't take much time. Councillor Carrick, to your first question, currently in Essex County, there are several first responder mental health teams piloting right now. Windsor has several, and the OPP do. What they are a social worker, mental health support worker partnered with a police officer. Nowhere yet have we graduated to where mental health support worker goes solo. Everything is partnered with a police officer. We're looking at it. Currently, what our options are for LaSalle, we're sort of allowing some of our neighboring agencies to sort of work through the difficult parts. But we do have our coast team going, which conducts the follow-up. And actually, without going into too much detail, we have plans for expanding that and moving that forward. So right now in the county, there's only a few teams that partner, but with projects like the community safety well-being, part of the goal is to help push this forward to make it more realistic, even for small services like LaSalle, to make these projects worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Council's pleasure. Councillor Desjardins moves to receive the report, support by Deputy Mayor Meloche. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Matheson. Town of Kingsville correspondence regarding Save Eye Care in Ontario. The recommendation is to receive and endorse. Moved by Councillor Dicio Spagnolo and support by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Extension of hearing officer, Ms. Jean.
Thank you, Mary Bondi. We rolled out the AMPS program about a year ago, and at that time we did contract out to hearing officers. Their contract is up this year. We did it for 1 year at that time to see how it would work out. What we've decided to do moving forward is to renew their contract for 3 years rather than having that come up every year and do this annually. What the hearing officer does is if a resident is issued a ticket, they can go to the screening officer, who is our town solicitor, Dominic Dedalt, and they can appeal that ticket. If they would like to move on further, we do have the hearing officer who can review that. The hearing officer has to be an unbiased party, so it's not a member of our staff. Both of our hearing officers have been contacted and have agreed to renew their contract for another 3 years. So that's the recommendation on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jean. Moved by Councillor. Do you have any questions? Councillor, we have a mover, Councillor Dicio Spagnolo, and a support, Councillor Desjardins. On the motion discussion, Mr. Renault.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question for Ms. Jean. How often do we have residents that need to make it all the way to this hearing officer? Is this something we do monthly, or is this something that is not often worried about?
At this point, unfortunately, fortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to actually use our hearing officer. It's by appointment only. So it's the sort of thing that when there is an appeal, we would contract them out during that time frame. So it's a random amount of time that we would need them throughout that time period.
Okay, I think that's good to hear. I'll support the motion.
On the motion, we have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jean. We have municipal election alternative voting method, Ms. S. Strolico.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. So I'm here before you this evening, Council, to request that Council approve e-voting as the alternative method of election for the 2022 municipal election, and that you adopt the implementing bylaw to give effect to that approval. As you are probably all aware, the election is quickly approaching. This time next year, October 24th to be exact, will be voting day. And we have already begun preparing as best we can for the election. So we are looking to get your approval and get a decision made with respect to the election so we can move full steam ahead. As you are also probably aware, and I've covered in my report, there have been a number of changes to the Municipal Election Act since the last election. Rank balloting, which was a huge discussion piece throughout the province during the last municipal election, that option has been removed from municipalities. It's no longer on the table. And then there have been a number of timeline changes which are significant for council, but we are still within all of those timelines. So for instance, nomination day has been moved to the third Friday in August. That has been pushed back. Before it was in July. We've also, the province has also changed the dates for council to approve or adopt the bylaw for an alternative method of election and vote counting equipment. So previously, those bylaws were to be passed in the year prior to the election, and now those bylaws need to be passed in the year of the election. And again, the clerk has to establish forms and procedures. That date has also been pushed back to June 1st in the year of the election. The issue with those timelines, and all the clerks that I've spoken with have the same feeling. If we wait until those deadlines, it really doesn't give council services a whole lot of opportunity to make full preparations, which is why we're coming to you now requesting a decision on the method of election. So as you would all remember, the last municipal election was an electronic election, and for all intents and purposes, I mean, I was not your clerk, but I understood it was very successful. You had a 42.12% voter turnout, which is approximately 4 percentage points higher than the provincial average. I do understand in speaking with staff that there was a little bit of a hiccup and some complaints with respect to the telephone voting platform. And in discussions with the staff, we've decided that there are probably a few ways that we could hopefully address this to prevent this from happening again. And some of that revolves around communications to the electors and really amping that communication up to explain to them, you know, how to use that telephone platform, and also having discussions with whatever vendor we would be contracting with to see if there's something they can do within their system to minimize the likelihood of a ballot being inadvertently or prematurely submitted. I'm just going to review a few things with e-voting, which I'm sure everybody here is aware with. It is an extremely accessible method of election. It allows your voters to vote anywhere, anytime, no requirement to come to a voting location. And from what I could tell in reviewing the vendors that we would be looking at engaging or speaking with to submit a proposal, they're all compatible with accessible technologies and allow for the elector to implement some customization options with respect to adjusting contrast and a language translation. Additionally, we would establish, again, voting help centers like was done in the previous election. So once voting is open, we would establish these voting help centers. So if there were individuals who wanted assistance, they too would be able to come to the Civic Center and get assistance from the election officials. Similar, we would have a couple of days where we would go to the retirement homes to provide that kind of assistance without requiring those individuals to come to the Civic Center. I was in discussions with IT with respect to the security of the various platforms and reviewed the materials on the websites for the providers I was able to locate. And for all intents and purposes, it really does seem that the vendors have secure and auditable processes in place to maintain not only the integrity of the election, but the security of the election and maintain voter anonymity. So I know that has been one of the chief concerns just in talking about electronic elections, but it seems that the providers are taking precautions to make sure that we uphold those principles of the MEA. Just want to make sure that I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Yep. Okay, yep, I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. My report was provided in the package, certainly open to questions, but am looking for council to adopt an electronic election for the 2022 municipal election.
Thank you to our clerk, Mrs. Astrologo. Any questions from council? Mr. Reno.
Not a question, just in general. I encourage administration to look at that phone the phone method, because that was about the only concern that I heard all of in the last election. Most people were happy with the fact that they could go at any time of the day and do their thing on their own time. And obviously the results of the percentages proved that. So I think that is really, you've identified as the biggest concern. And I look forward to the election next year.
Any other questions? Council's pleasure. There's basically 3 recommendations that were received. We approve e-voting and adopt a necessary bylaw. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, support by Councilor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting minutes, September 15th, 2021. Councilor Desjardins.
Thank you. The only thing I'd like to add to the minutes, if anybody has been up by the Volmer, we have our community boards in place. Our communication boards were put up, I think, a couple of weeks ago. We've got one up on the concession stand and one in the Volmer. I actually had a call from someone the other day saying, thank you. They appreciated having them there. So that's a good thing to hear. And other than that, nothing else to report. So I would make a motion to accept the minutes.
Support, moved by Councilor Desjardins, support by Councilor Dicho Spagnolo. Discussion. Councilor Reno.
No, we're fine. I'm supporting.
Okay, all in favor? That carries. Thank you very much, Councilor Desjardins. And we have committee minutes for the Parks and Recs and Events Committee meeting September 16th, 2021. And again, Councilor Desjardins.
Thank you. Good reports about the Benoit House. It's nice to see that we're getting a lot of community input about the Benoit House, how we can use it, what we should be providing for within the building. That's very interesting to listen to comments from folks who have seen, let's call them municipal museums around different cities, actually some of them out of the country. And they're bringing forward some different ideas, things that maybe we hadn't thought of. So I'm encouraged by that. As well, the software efficiencies, Ms. Finero was talking about how well they are moving forward using them at the Volmer, and Scott, the same thing. So it's nice to know that money that we've put out to have our systems improved are really helping us and helping our staff to work not only smarter, they're working more efficiently, I think. So those are the main things that came out of that meeting. If anybody has any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bonnie. I'm not sure if I can ask this now. I just noticed the date of the meeting was September. So we don't have minutes for October meeting yet. I was just wondering if we had any idea of what our plans are for the holidays this year with COVID regulations and things in place. I guess I'm just wondering if we've started any planning for the holiday season, or if this will be a year where we're going to bypass it again. I don't know if we can ask this now or if new business. It's up.
I think that would be something that Ms. Finero can address. We do have a meeting coming up, at which point I would expect we'll talk about Christmas or the holiday season. So maybe Ms. Finero, if you'd like to take that one.
Ms. Finero.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Malash. We have started our planning for the holiday season. As council is aware, we do have our inaugural holiday light display coming starting the November the 26th. We are working through the details on the programming for that, and we will be bringing further information forward. I believe Ms. Hodre will be making an announcement either just prior to or just after Remembrance Day with more details on that. We are in the process of confirming all of the various entertainment options and program options, and we are working on an enhanced New Year's Eve event as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Finero. Thank you, Ms. Councilor Desjardins. You moved, Councilor Desjardins. Support, Councilor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Fire Committee meeting minutes, September 16th, 2021. Councilor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. The biggest thing on the last meeting was the quarterly fire report. Two things to mention. First of all, the calls were up a little higher than what we had been not expecting, but what we had been seeing in the last little while with COVID. You know, things were a little slower, but for some reason, the last quarter was up a little higher. There was a little bit extra work being done with our marine unit. What I would like to say, you know, for anyone who's watching, there has been a lot of talk in the community pages and in the Tim Hortons and all these places about, you know, community fire stations and how busy is our fire service and what kind of calls do they get. You know, I would just like everybody to know that these agendas have a quarterly report 4 times a year. You can see all the information. It's published on the LaSalle website. And, you know, if you want to see those types of stats and numbers, I feel that our chief puts out a great report, and I look forward to it. So if anyone's looking for that kind of information, you can send them to the website.
Thank you, Councilor Reno. I'm assuming you're moving the minutes. Support. Deputy Mayor Malash, all in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Summary of reports to council. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash. Support Councilor Akpata. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Bylaws. We have 3 bylaws, all 3 readings, or 6 bylaws, I'm sorry. All 3 readings. Moved by Councilor Dietrich Spagnolo, support Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Council questions. Councilor, okay, Councilor Akpata, then we'll go Councilor Dietrich Spagnolo, Councilor Desjardins, then Councilor Reno.
I have an interesting one, Your Worship. Thank you very much. I've received a couple of emails about helicopter overflights over the town of LaSalle. And I realize that it might not be anything that we directly can do with it, as I'm sure it's Transport Canada that is responsible for overflights of any manned or unmanned aircraft. But I just was, a number of residents have just asked me if we are aware of what these flights may be, and if so, what they're doing over the town. Just an inquiry, sir.
Mr. Militia is going to take that one.
I will attempt to answer what we can. So we too have heard some of the concerns or the comments raised by the community with respect to the flights going back and forth. We suspect that is trips between the Windsor Airport and the Detroit airports. We suspect, and with the news on the border changes, that may dissipate to some degree. We really have no control over what happens in the airways over top of the town of LaSalle. I think if council will remember, probably about 5 or 6 years ago when Detroit Metro Airport was undergoing some runway improvements and construction, they changed the flight path, and the flight path came right over LaSalle for the better part of a year. And that's just part of, unfortunately, kind of where we're situated. It's good to be close when we want to get away, but sometimes we have to deal with the traffic that comes with it. But unfortunately, there's not much we can do about the traffic overhead, and that is a Transport Canada type of regulated activity.
Thank you very much, sir.
Next up, we have Councilor Dietrich Spagnolo. Oh, Krista Malash, you want to add something to that?
Yes, just I did see a report from the city of Windsor, and they've looked into it and did say that there really is nothing that can be done, but it's beyond the trips of people trying to get over the border. There's a company in Detroit who has started sightseeing tours, and they're doing a sightseeing tour throughout Detroit downtown and Windsor Essex County area. So that's why we're seeing an increase in that traffic, but there definitely is not anything that we can do.
Thank you for that information. Councilor Dietrich Spagnolo.
Thank you, through you. I just have a question or a statement first. I spent a lot of time at the Vollmer, and I noticed that Rink A has a few accessible benches and Rink B has none. And I noticed that on the weekend when I was at a hockey game, and there was an elderly man who came in and he had to sit on his walker and his wife had to stand. So I did offer her a chair, but she just stood. But I thought to myself, why don't we have a bench in rink
We
B?
do.
We'll move that one to
There's no
Mr.
bench
Osborne.
in rink B. There's 3 or 4 in rink A, like the one closest to the pool, but the one closest to the exit, there's no bench anywhere.
I thought we did.
No, there isn't.
Mr.
So
Osborne.
Well, I'm not sure why that is, but we can look into that further. I think that's the first we've kind of heard that comment. So yeah, we can take a look at that.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Actually, tonight I have a couple of questions and a kudo to Public Works about the dog park. I've been out to take a visit, and I believe Councillor Reno's been out as well. It's coming along well, and residents are happy that we're doing it, so thank you. And they're just asking, do we have an idea? I know we're waiting for grass to grow in. Do we have any idea of when it might open?
Mr. Osborne.
All right, my camera's a little funny there, but yes, the grass is starting to grow. It hasn't taken quite well enough to get people in there. It might do some more harm than good. So I think realistically it'll be springtime. Once the grass really takes hold, springtime will be the best time for people to do it.
Okay, pass that along. Also, with changes that are going on with COVID, calls from a few seniors about when they might be able to access the town center for their friendship center meetings. Any ideas?
So we are, we were eager to hear the announcement on Friday from Premier Ford with respect to the loosening of restrictions. We really do hope that the timelines that are set out are accurate and are doable. We will note, though, that as part of the announcement, they do coach the timeline with, again, assuming that there are no the case counts are not at a concerning level. So we are developing a plan here in terms of opening up town hall, both the atrium, including the senior center, and actually even council chambers as well. We do have some timelines now that we can work towards with that. So we are going to be in touch with the seniors group once we internally develop what that timeline will be. One of the challenges we have with the seniors group is that although we do have the Friendship Center, it's effectively made up of probably 6 to 8 subgroups which manage themselves, and they share space. So that gets a little bit problematic when we're having to control capacity limits and distancing and masking and proof of vaccination. So we're working through some of that at this point. I would suggest in the near future, we'll be back to council with a bit of a plan to mirror what the provincial plan is in terms of how we intend on opening up our various facilities to the fullest extent as outlined under the provincial mandate. So it's a long-winded answer to sit tight. We are working on a plan. We have heard those same concerns as well, and we do want our seniors back in town hall in the same way we want normal activities to resume here in town hall. So we are looking forward to that. We'll be working with them as part of that process.
Okay, thank you. I can let them know that it will be announced one of these days. And my last question, there was an interesting article in the Windsor Star the other day about, it was a report about the democratic health of Ontario's 32 largest cities. And I thought that some of the facts that they brought forward were kind of interesting. And one of them I felt worked into what Mr. Matheson talked about this evening about opportunities to reach our priorities and what we need to do with continual community engagement. In the article in the paper, they were talking about the city of London and Thunder Bay, Chatham, Kent, those areas. One of them talked about how they invite their residents to take part in municipal politics. Pickering has a program which invites the public to meet. Now they meet weekly. I think that might be a little bit much, but if we could maybe set something up to talk about planning processes, services, and programs that we have in the town. I know that we don't always have great input, but I don't know if there's some kind of a report that could be put together for that. And then in London, they have a neighborhood decision-making program where they talk to the neighborhoods to build stronger, safer, and connected areas. And again, it's public input. Some of these things need money to make them run. I don't know if we have money in the budget to do it, but I did think that they were interesting concerns with what we're going through with the regional priorities. So just something, if we could maybe over the next couple of 3 months, get some kind of a report from those cities about what they do, how they do it, and if we thought we could get it to work in LaSalle. Again, long-winded, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, certainly part of our strategic plan is to increase engagement both with the community, with the business community, the residents at large, the educational systems, and even our own employee group for that matter. So it is a priority of the organization to increase community engagement in all facets. So we would be looking, this would be an interesting research project that we could certainly undertake. Again, I may just follow up with you directly, Councillor Desjardins, just to get a little bit more information as to where you got this. I did not see the article, so just to see the article and see a bit of what your perspective might be. So if that's okay, Mr. Mayor, we'll just follow up with Councillor Desjardins on that.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. I just think it's something that we are trying to really build our community engagement. So I just thought these were interesting factors that we could bring in. So thank you for that, and we'll have a conversation. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. Now we go to Councillor Renault.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, thanks to Councillor Desjardins for taking away a couple of my thoughts here tonight. But definitely, there are seniors looking to get back in the building, and there definitely is a lot of excitement about the dog park. I had the opportunity to take a ride out there with another elder, Renault, and I like to take him on a tour of the facilities every now and then because he's just not following social media like the rest of us. So anyway, we went down and we took a look, and it was nice to see that administration's plan that was laid out by Mr. Beggs not too long ago was right to the point. The fences look great. The pad looks great. We're waiting for the watering facilities will be coming next. It really does look good, but I took some close-up pictures of the ground. You can see those little tiny, gentle little green hairs trying to come up, but it's so wet out there that the town's done a good job by keeping it locked up for now because with all this wetness we've had the last couple of days and those delicate little grasses, it would be torn up. So good job by administration to protect what's going to be a very exciting opening day eventually. My only other question would go to Mr. Solani and possibly Mr. Thiessen. I had a resident reach out to me concerned now that Malden Road is a mixed-use corridor because the rental unit that she was in is now being divided into two for a mixed use, for an office use and for her where her living space is rented. And there's been walls put up in the middle of the building now to separate it all out. And she was wondering if, first of all, if it helps, it's an MU2H she was asking about, which I looked up and understand it's a mixed use. But her concern is that if they're going to put a wall down the middle of the building, is there anything that our building inspectors need to follow up with in regards to the codes? And furthermore, is there anything our fire department, now that it's a mixed use building that it wasn't before, if they have to follow up with any type of fire code? So two quick questions, and I hate to put you on the spot, but just curious.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Renault. You never put Mr. Solani on the spot. He has all the answers.
Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Renault. Yes, in the new zoning bylaw that was recently adopted by Council, that area is a mixed-use corridor. And for individuals who would like to start to do some conversions of buildings for commercial residential within the existing building, they should be contacting our chief building official, Andrew Colucci. And Andrew would be able to walk them through the building code requirements and the fire code requirements. There are some specific things that they need to pay attention to depending on what the nature of the commercial use is that's being proposed. before they do any work on the property, they should be meeting with our staff and applying for the required permits as well, so that proper inspections are done, and that at the end of the day, they have a legal unit and it's safe for the public and the occupiers of that space.
Mr. Reno, that answers your question? Oh,
It does from the building code, and I see the chief is online.
I just saw him pop up. Mr. Thiessen.
Yeah, through you, your worship. The fire service and the building department work very closely on these issues. And depending on the change and the mixed use, through the correspondence that we get through the building department, if we do need to do inspection, we will definitely do an inspection to follow up with respect to enforcing the building code or the fire code.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your answers.
Any other council questions? Seeing none, reports from committees. None. I'm going to ask for a report for an update from Mr. Mara in relation to Westport Marina. I'm sure there's a lot of people asking where we're at, and Mr. Mara, if you can give us a little update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the update on the construction activity at Westport Marina, a lot of work has been occurring in the last few months. It's the important stuff that gets buried under the ground and that no one ever gets to see it again. So a lot of the underground work has been done, footings, foundations, and underground plumbing. They are just starting to get installation of the above grade features within the building. A lot of work is being contained within the building. So certainly we are progressing well out there. There has been a bit of a slight delay in some material deliveries, but they are working through some of those headaches that's common through the construction industry at this point. Certainly, we are looking for an updated schedule at some point in time that we need to kind of update and move ourselves through, and we will provide a bit more of a formal update to council. We were also looking at trying to organize a internal tour with council members. Certainly over the next month, probably towards the end of November, beginning of December is probably an opportune time for those tours to occur. So that is kind of a bit of an update. And at that point in time, when we do have those tours, we'll have a bit more better refinement of the overall schedule and completion date.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. Confirmatory bylaw. First reading, Councillor Reno and Deputy Mayor Meloche, all in favor. That carries. Second reading, Councillor Dicho Spagnola and Councillor Akpada, all in favor. Third and final reading, we have Councillor DeJarley and Councillor Carrick, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. You have a meeting, a list of the upcoming meetings, and everyone have a good night. Meeting is adjourned, and thank you, viewing audience on YouTube.